Take a moment and look outside. Wherever you are right now, there's probably grass. On your lawn, in the park, covering fields that stretch to the horizon. Grass is so ordinary, so constant, that we barely notice it. It's just there. Always has been, always will be. Except it hasn't. For most of Earth's history, grass didn't exist. And during the age of dinosaurs, that immense span of time when giants walked the Earth for over 170 million years, grass was almost entirely absent. Imagine standing in the Mesozoic era, 200 million years ago. You're surrounded by giants, creatures larger than any land animal alive today. But look down at your feet. There's no grass. Look across the valley. No meadows, no prairies, no lawns. The ground is covered in something else entirely. Look up at the hills, across the floodplains, into the forests. Nowhere, in any direction, would you see what we consider the most ordinary plant on Earth. The world that dinosaurs inhabited was fundamentally alien to us, not just because of the creatures that walked it, but because the very carpet of the planet was different. The texture of the ground, the smell of crushed vegetation, the sound of wind moving through plants, all of it was strange. This is the story of that world. A world before grass. And it's going to change how you see everything. Let's go back to the beginning of the Mesozoic era, roughly 252 million years ago. The Triassic period is just starting, and Earth is recovering from the worst mass extinction in its history. The Permian-Triassic extinction event, sometimes called the Great Dying, wiped out more than 90% of all marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrates. The planet is wounded, struggling, and life is slowly, painfully rebuilding itself. The world at the dawn of the Triassic is almost unimaginably harsh. All the continents are fused into one massive supercontinent called Pangaea. The interior of this landmass is a vast desert, thousands of miles from any ocean. The climate is hot and dry, with extreme seasons. Monsoons drench the coasts, but the heartland is scorched and barren. The landscapes here don't look like anything you'd recognize. Near the coasts and rivers, you'd find forests, but they're strange forests. Towering conifers, some reaching heights of over 100 feet, dominate the canopy. These are relatives of modern pines, cypresses, and araucarias, but many species are long extinct. Their needle-like leaves are adapted to conserve water in a world where rainfall is unpredictable and seasonal. The air beneath these trees would smell of resin, sharp and medicinal. Beneath these giants, the understory is thick with ferns. Not the delicate ferns you might keep in your living room, but robust, ancient varieties, some as tall as small trees. Ferns have been around for over 350 million years by this point, and they're masters of survival. They thrive in damp, shaded areas, their fronds unfurling in that iconic spiral pattern. During the Triassic, some ferns grow in dense thickets, creating almost impenetrable barriers. Others colonize disturbed ground near rivers, quickly covering mudflats and sandbars. And then there are the cycads. If you've ever seen a sago palm, you have a sense of what these look like: thick, woody trunks topped with crowns of tough, waxy leaves. Cycads are seed plants, but they're not flowering plants. They reproduce through large cones, and they're incredibly tough. Some species can survive drought, fire, even poor soils. During the Triassic, they're just beginning their rise, occupying drier areas where ferns can't compete. But by the Jurassic, they'll be everywhere, the defining plant of an entire era. Scattered among all this, you'd also find ginkgos. Today, there's only one species of ginkgo left, Ginkgo biloba, often planted in city streets because it tolerates pollution. But back then, ginkgos were diverse and widespread, their fan-shaped leaves carpeting the forest floor in autumn just like they do today. Walk through a Triassic forest in fall, and you'd crunch through layers of golden ginkgo leaves, their distinctive smell. Some describe it as unpleasant, others as oddly sweet, filling the air. There were also horsetails, primitive plants with jointed stems and a rough texture. Some grew to heights of 30 feet or more during earlier periods, though by the Triassic they were generally smaller. And there were seed ferns, plants that looked like ferns but reproduced with seeds rather than spores. These were ancient holdovers, and they wouldn't last much longer. What you wouldn't find, anywhere, is grass. Not a single blade. Not even a primitive ancestor recognizable as grass. The family of plants that would become grass hadn't evolved yet. The herbivores of the early Triassic were relatively small. The largest were dicynodonts, mammal-like reptiles with beaks and tusks, but even these were only a few hundred pounds. They fed on the tough, fibrous vegetation, processing it in specialized guts. But as the Triassic progressed, new creatures emerged. The first dinosaurs appeared around 230 million years ago, small and insignificant at first, but destined to inherit the Earth. As we move into the Jurassic period, around 201 million years ago, the planet starts to shift. Pangea is beginning to break apart. The Atlantic Ocean is opening up, just a narrow seaway at first, but growing. The climate is generally warm and humid across most of the world, and carbon dioxide levels are high, perhaps 5 times what they are today. This is a greenhouse world, and plants are thriving. The Jurassic is often called the age of cycads, and for good reason. These plants dominate the landscape in a way that's hard to overstate. If you walked through a Jurassic forest, you'd be pushing past cycad fronds constantly. They're the shrubs, the mid-story plants, the texture of the world. Some grow as solitary trunks reaching 15 feet high. Others form multi-stemmed clumps. Their leaves are tough and leathery, designed to last for years. When they reproduce, they produce massive cones, some weighing over 100 pounds, filled with seeds the size of chestnuts. Conifers are still the tall trees, and they've diversified extensively. In some regions, forests of Araucarias, relatives of the modern monkey puzzle tree and Norfolk Island pine, create dense, towering woodlands. These trees have a distinctive appearance, straight trunks covered in geometric, interlocking branches that spiral up toward the sky. In other areas, you'd find ancient relatives of redwoods, cedars, and pines. These trees produce massive amounts of pollen and seeds, feeding the herbivores below. And speaking of herbivores, this is when dinosaurs really start to get big. Sauropods, the long-necked, long-tailed giants like Brachiosaurus, Diplodocus, and Apatosaurus, are evolving into the largest land animals that have ever existed. Some of them weigh as much as 10 elephants, perhaps 80 tons or more. They're consuming hundreds of pounds of plant matter every single day, maybe as much as half a ton for the largest species. But here's the thing, none of it is grass. They're eating ferns, cycad fronds, conifer needles, ginkgo leaves, and the foliage of various seed plants. These plants are tough. Conifer needles are fibrous, waxy, and low in nutrients. Cycads contain toxins. Some modern cycads produce neurotoxins that need to be processed carefully, likely by gut bacteria. Ferns are full of silica, which wears down teeth like sandpaper. This is not an easy diet. This is some of the toughest, most nutritionally poor vegetation you could try to survive on. So how did these animals manage it? How did creatures weighing as much as a house sustain themselves on plants that would be toxic or indigestible to most modern animals? The answer lies in their bodies, which were essentially walking fermentation tanks. Sauropods had enormous guts. Some paleontologists estimate their digestive systems might have contained over a ton of fermenting plant material at any given time. These weren't stomachs in the way we think of them, but massive fermentation chambers where billions of bacteria and other microorganisms broke down plant material over days or even weeks, extracting every possible calorie. They swallowed stones, called gastroliths, which accumulated in a muscular part of the digestive system. These stones ground up food like a mill, breaking down tough fibers before they even reached the fermentation chambers. Some sauropod gastroliths have been found polished smooth, worn down by years of grinding plant matter. Their teeth tell another story. Some sauropods, like Diplodocus, had pencil-like teeth that simply stripped foliage from branches. They didn't chew at all. Others, like Camarasaurus, had more robust teeth that could crush and process tougher material. But many sauropod species had teeth that constantly replaced themselves, wearing down and being renewed throughout their lives. A sauropod might go through thousands of teeth in a lifetime, growing new ones as fast as the old ones wore away. And they were eating constantly. An animal that size, with that metabolism, would have spent most of its waking hours feeding, moving from tree to tree, from fern thicket to fern thicket, processing the landscape. The Jurassic forests were shaped by these giants. They browsed the high canopy, creating gaps where light could reach the forest floor. They trampled clearings, knocked down trees, and spread seeds in their dung. They were ecosystem engineers, and the plants evolved in response to them. Some plants may have developed toxins specifically to deter browsing, though this arms race between plants and herbivores is hard to trace in the fossil record. Others may have evolved faster growth to recover from being eaten. The relationship between plants and the animals that fed on them was a constant negotiation, a dance that had been going on for hundreds of millions of years. Now we're entering the Cretaceous period, around 145 million years ago. This is the final chapter of the dinosaur story, and it's when things start to change dramatically. The continents are continuing to drift apart. South America is separating from Africa. India is an island, drifting northward. The Atlantic Ocean is widening. Sea levels are high, some of the highest in Earth's history, and shallow seas flood the continents, creating vast inland waterways. For the first 50 million years of the Cretaceous, the landscape still looks broadly similar to the Jurassic. Conifers and cycads still dominate. Ferns still carpet the understory. Dinosaurs continue to diversify, with new forms appearing, massive predators like Giganotosaurus and Carcharodontosaurus, armored herbivores like Ankylosaurus, and the ancestors of famous late Cretaceous species. But then, around 130 to 125 million years ago, something revolutionary happens. Flowering plants, angiosperms, appear. The first fossil evidence of flowering plants comes from the early Cretaceous. They're small at first, occupying disturbed habitats near rivers and in forest clearings. But they have something that gives them an enormous advantage. They reproduce quickly. A conifer might take years to mature and produce seeds. A flowering plant can go from seed to flowering to producing new seeds in a single season. They also offer something new: enclosed seeds protected by fruit. This allows them to form partnerships with animals, insects, early mammals, eventually birds, who eat the fruit and disperse the seeds. This is a fundamentally different strategy from the conifers and cycads, which rely on wind or simple gravity. The Cretaceous world is transforming into something more colorful, more diverse, more modern. There are now magnolias, water lilies, sycamores, and early relatives of oaks and beeches. There are flowers, actual flowers, colors and scents that didn't exist before. Bees appear, evolving from wasps, and a new kind of relationship emerges, the intricate partnership between flowering plants and pollinators. Dinosaurs notice. Herbivores like hadrosaurs, the duck-billed dinosaurs, evolve specialized teeth and jaw structures to process these new, softer plants. They develop dental batteries, hundreds of tiny teeth packed together that can grind plant material into a pulp. Triceratops and other ceratopsians develop powerful beaks and shearing teeth to clip through flowering shrubs and low vegetation. Some theropods may even start eating fruit, though the evidence for this is still debated. The late Cretaceous world, particularly in the last 10 million years before the extinction, is recognizably modern in many ways. The forests have oak-like trees, palm-like plants, and flowering shrubs. Walk through a late Cretaceous forest, and aside from the dinosaurs, it might not look entirely alien. The plants would seem familiar, at least from a distance. But even here, in this world of flowers and innovation, grass is still almost invisible. Here's where the story gets really interesting. For decades, scientists believed that grass didn't exist during the age of dinosaurs at all. It was thought to have evolved only after the mass extinction in the Paleogene, when mammals took over. Grass was supposed to be a post-dinosaur innovation, something that appeared in the wreckage of the Old World. The reasoning seemed sound. The oldest confirmed grass fossils came from about 55 million years ago, well after the extinction. Grass pollen, which is distinctive under a microscope, didn't show up in the fossil record until the Paleogene. And ecologically, it made sense. Grass is adapted to grazing, to open environments, to seasonal fires, all things that seemed more characteristic of the mammal-dominated world after the dinosaurs. Then, in 2005, a team of researchers led by Caroline Stromberg made a discovery that changed everything. They were examining coprolites, fossilized dinosaur dung, from the late Cretaceous of India, specifically from a formation called the Lameda Formation. These coprolites were roughly 65 to 71 million years old, from the very end of the Cretaceous, just before the extinction event. And inside them, preserved in exquisite detail, were phytoliths, tiny silica structures that plants produce in their tissues. Different plants produce distinctively shaped phytoliths, and these were unmistakable. They were from grass. Not just grass-like plants, but actual grasses, members of the family Poaceae. This was direct, unambiguous evidence that grass existed during the age of dinosaurs. And not just existed, dinosaurs were eating it. The discovery sent ripples through paleontology. If grass was around in the late Cretaceous, when did it actually evolve? Molecular clock studies, which estimate evolutionary timing based on DNA differences between modern species, suggested grass might have originated even earlier, perhaps as far back as 100 million years ago or more. Since then, more evidence has emerged. Grass phytoliths have been found in other late Cretaceous sites around the world. Fossilized grass cuticles, the waxy outer layer of leaves, have been discovered. The picture is becoming clearer. Grass definitely existed alongside dinosaurs for millions of years. But, and this is crucial, it wasn't common. The grass found in these coprolites and fossil sites was primitive, more like the wild grasses you'd find growing in the shade of a modern forest floor than the vast prairies we associate with grass. It was probably small, growing in patches near rivers, in clearings, in disturbed areas. It was a minor component of the ecosystem, not a dominant one. Dinosaurs were eating it, yes, but only occasionally. The coprolites that contain grass phytoliths also contain ferns, palm material, and other plants. Grass was part of the menu, but it was a side dish, not the main course. A snack, not a staple. So why was grass so rare? To understand that, we need to understand what makes grass special and what held it back during the age of dinosaurs. Grass is a type of flowering plant, but it's unlike almost any other. Most plants grow from the tips of their stems and branches, in areas called apical meristems. If you cut off the top of most plants, you damage or kill them. Grass, however, grows from the base, from intercalary meristems located near the ground. You can mow a lawn, graze a field, cut grass down to stubble, and it will keep growing. You can set a prairie on fire, burning everything above ground, and the grass will come back from its roots. It's built to be eaten, trampled, burned, and to survive all of it. Grass also has incredible adaptations for dealing with tough conditions. Its roots form dense, fibrous mats that hold soil together, preventing erosion. A single grass plant might have roots extending 6 feet down or more, reaching water that other plants can't access. Grass can grow in poor soils, in dry climates, in places where trees struggle. It's efficient with nutrients, particularly nitrogen, and can thrive where other plants would starve. And crucially, grass has evolved a symbiotic relationship with grazers. Animals eat the leaves, trample the ground, and fertilize the soil with their dung. In doing so, they actually help the grass spread. They keep trees from invading. They prevent other plants from outcompeting the grass, and they create the disturbance that grass loves. It's a partnership refined over millions of years. But in the Cretaceous, these conditions didn't exist. There were no large herds of grazers. The dinosaurs that existed were mostly browsers, feeding on trees and shrubs, not ground cover. They didn't form vast migrating herds that would maintain open grasslands. There were no seasonal fires, or at least, not the kind of regular, sweeping fires that grasslands depend on. The climate was also wrong. The late Cretaceous was warm and wet, with high carbon dioxide levels. These are perfect conditions for forests, for lush vegetation, for trees that grow tall and shade the ground. Grass struggles in deep shade. It needs open spaces, sunlight, and seasonal stress, drought, fire, or cold. That gives it an advantage over trees. There were also no grass specialists yet. The insects, the bacteria, the fungi, the grazing mammals, none of the organisms that would later form intricate relationships with grasslands existed yet. Grass was there, but the ecosystem that would allow it to dominate wasn't. So grass existed, but it was waiting for the world to change. And then, 66 million years ago, it did. An asteroid roughly 6 miles in diameter slammed into what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, at a place called Chicxulub. It was traveling at perhaps 12 miles per second. The impact released the energy of billions of nuclear bombs, perhaps 100 million megatons. It vaporized rock, excavated a crater over 100 miles wide, and sent a shockwave around the world. Within hours, debris ejected from the impact was raining down across the planet, heating the atmosphere to oven-like temperatures. Forests ignited. Wildfires swept across continents. Animals that couldn't find shelter, underground, underwater, in caves, were burned or suffocated. The sky filled with ash, dust, and aerosols, blocking out the sun. Some models suggest the world was plunged into darkness for months, maybe even years. Photosynthesis stopped. Temperatures plummeted. In the darkness and cold, plants died. Herbivores starved. Carnivores followed. The fossil record shows the devastation. In rock layers just above the impact, called the KPG boundary, we find a sudden disappearance of species. All non-avian dinosaurs went extinct. Pterosaurs vanished. Mosasaurs and plesiosaurs disappeared from the oceans. 75% of all species on Earth were wiped out. But grass survived. Why? Because it was small. Because it grew from the base, with its growing points protected near or below the soil. Because its seeds could lie dormant in the soil, waiting, sometimes for years, for conditions to improve. Grass seeds are tough, designed to survive drought, fire, and harsh conditions. They could survive this. When the skies finally cleared and the sun returned, grass was one of the first plants to come back. It spread across the scorched earth, covering the ash-covered landscapes. For a while, in the immediate aftermath of the extinction, the world might have been dominated by ferns and grasses, fast-growing, opportunistic plants that could colonize disturbed ground quickly. But this was temporary. The climate was still warm. Forests returned. Trees reclaimed the land. And once again, grass retreated to the margins, waiting for its moment. The world that emerged after the asteroid was unrecognizable. The Paleogene period began roughly 66 million years ago, and it was a time of rebuilding. The great dinosaurs were gone, but mammals, small, adaptable creatures that had lived in the dinosaur shadows for over 150 million years, began to diversify. Early Paleogene mammals were mostly small, the size of rats and squirrels. But they evolved rapidly, filling the empty ecological niches left by the dinosaurs. Within 10 million years, there were mammalian predators, herbivores, and omnivores of all sizes. Within 20 million years, there were mammals as large as rhinos. For millions of years, forests still dominated. The Paleocene and Eocene epochs, spanning from 66 to 34 million years ago, were times of warmth. Palm trees grew in Alaska. Crocodiles lived in the Arctic. The climate was so warm that there were no permanent ice caps, not at the poles, not anywhere. Tropical and subtropical forests stretched across most continents. Grass existed during this time, but it was still rare. Small patches and forest clearings along riverbanks in disturbed areas. Not ecosystems, not the dominant vegetation. Just there, persisting, slowly evolving. But around 40 million years ago, something started to shift. The Earth began to cool. Antarctica, which had been drifting southward for millions of years, finally reached the South Pole and became isolated from other continents. Ocean currents changed, and cold water began circulating around Antarctica. The continent froze, forming permanent ice sheets. This was the beginning of a long-term cooling trend that would continue, with fluctuations, for the next 40 million years and counting. As the Earth cooled, the climate became more seasonal. The warm, wet conditions that favored forests began to break down. Rainfall patterns shifted. Some regions became drier. Around 30 million years ago, grass was still uncommon. But by 20 million years ago, during the Miocene epoch, something dramatic was happening. Grasslands were spreading. The spread of grasslands during the Miocene was one of the most significant ecological transformations in Earth's history. Within a few million years, grasslands went from being marginal habitats to covering vast areas of every continent except Antarctica. Why? The cooling climate was part of it, but there were other factors. The collision between India and Asia was creating the Himalayas, the highest mountain range on Earth. These mountains altered atmospheric circulation, creating rain shadows and affecting monsoon patterns. The interior of Asia became drier. Forests thinned. Grass moved in. In North America, the Rocky Mountains were creating similar effects. The Great Plains, once covered in forests and woodlands, began to dry out. Grasses spread across them, creating prairies that stretched from Canada to Mexico. In South America, the pampas were forming. In Africa, savannas were opening up, replacing forests with a mosaic of grassland and scattered trees. In Eurasia, the steppes, vast temperate grasslands, stretched from Eastern Europe to Mongolia. These weren't just patches of grass. These were ecosystems, entire biomes, unlike anything the planet had seen before. They created a new kind of world, and they changed everything. Grasslands created new evolutionary pressures. For herbivores, eating grass presented challenges. Grass is tough. It's full of silica, which wears down teeth faster than almost any other plant. It's often lower in nutrients than browse, the leaves of trees and shrubs. But grass is also abundant, and it grows back quickly after being eaten. Mammals adapted. In North America, horses evolved from small, forest-dwelling browsers into tall, fast runners with high-crowned teeth built to grind grass. Their legs grew longer, their toes reduced from 4 or 5 down to a single hoof, their bodies streamlined for speed. They became animals of the plains, able to run for miles across open ground. Their teeth tell the story. Early horses had low-crowned teeth suited for browsing soft leaves. But as grasslands spread, natural selection favored horses with higher-crowned teeth that could withstand years of grinding abrasive grass. By the late Miocene, horses had teeth with extremely high crowns, sometimes so tall that they had roots that grew continuously throughout the animal's life. In Africa, the ancestors of antelopes, zebras, and wildebeest emerged. They evolved similar adaptations: high-crowned teeth, long legs, and the ability to digest massive quantities of tough, fibrous vegetation. They formed herds, relying on numbers and speed to avoid predators. A single antelope is vulnerable, but a herd of 100 has many eyes, many ears, and presents a confusing mass of movement to a predator. Elephants evolved specialized teeth for processing grass. Instead of replacing teeth vertically like most mammals, elephants evolved a conveyor belt system where new teeth grow at the back of the jaw and gradually move forward, replacing worn teeth at the front. An elephant might go through 6 sets of teeth in a lifetime, each one designed to grind enormous quantities of tough vegetation. Even rodents adapted to grasslands. Prairie dogs, gophers, ground squirrels. These animals evolved to live in burrows beneath the grasslands, feeding on roots, seeds, and grass shoots. Their tunneling created complex underground ecosystems and aerated the soil, helping the grass itself. Predators changed too. Cats became faster, developing powerful sprints to chase prey across open ground. Cheetahs, the fastest land animals alive, are a product of the African savannas, evolved to catch the swift antelopes that feed there. Lions developed social hunting strategies, working together to bring down large prey. Wolves and wild dogs evolved stamina, hunting in packs over long distances. They developed the ability to run for hours, wearing down prey through persistence rather than speed. This required intelligence, cooperation, and communication, traits that would prove important for other species as well. And then there were the hominins, our ancestors. Around 6 to 7 million years ago, in East Africa, the forests were fragmenting. The climate was becoming drier, more seasonal. The trees that had covered the landscape for millions of years were thinning out, replaced by mosaics of woodland and grassland. The primates that lived there, the common ancestors of humans and chimpanzees, faced a choice: stay in the trees or venture into the open. Some stayed. They remained arboreal, living in the trees, swinging through the branches. They became modern chimpanzees and bonobos. Others ventured out. They began walking upright, freeing their hands for carrying things, for using tools, for gesturing. They learned to see farther across the plains, to spot predators and prey from a distance. They tracked herds, found water sources, coordinated hunts. Grasslands didn't just shape their bodies, they shaped their minds. The open savanna rewarded planning, cooperation, tool use, communication. It rewarded intelligence. An animal that could predict where the herds would be, that could work with others to drive prey into an ambush, that could use tools to process tough foods. That animal would have an advantage. Over millions of years, our ancestors evolved larger brains. They developed language, allowing them to share knowledge, to teach, to plan together. They domesticated fire, which allowed them to cook food, making it easier to digest and extracting more calories from tough plants and meat. And eventually, they domesticated grass itself. Around 12,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, humans in the Fertile Crescent began cultivating wild grasses with large seeds. They selected the plants with the biggest seeds, the ones that were easiest to harvest. Over generations, these wild grasses became wheat and barley. In East Asia, other humans domesticated rice. In Mesoamerica, they domesticated maize, corn. In Africa, they domesticated sorghum and millet. These domesticated grasses, cereal crops, allowed humans to produce surplus food, to support larger populations, to settle in permanent villages. They were the foundation of agriculture, of civilization itself. Grass, in a very real sense, made us human. And then we remade grass to feed ourselves. Today, grasslands cover more than 40% of Earth's land surface, excluding Antarctica and Greenland. They're one of the most important ecosystems on the planet. Prairies, savannas, steppes, pampas, these landscapes support an incredible diversity of life. But perhaps more importantly, grasslands feed the world. Most of the world's agriculture depends on domesticated grasses. Wheat, rice, corn, barley, oats, rye, sorghum, millet. These 7 crops provide more than half of all calories consumed by humans. Add in sugarcane, which is also a grass, and the proportion goes even higher. Grasslands also support most of the world's livestock. Cattle, sheep, goats. These animals are primarily grass eaters, descended from wild ancestors that evolved to graze on natural grasslands. But these ecosystems are also fragile, more fragile than they might appear. Grasslands are being converted to cropland, overgrazed by livestock, paved over for cities and roads. In North America, more than 90% of native prairies have been destroyed. In many other regions, the situation is similar. And here's the irony. Grass itself is one of the most resilient plants on Earth, but the ecosystems it creates are not. A grassland is not just grass. It's a community of hundreds of plant species, wildflowers, legumes, sedges, each playing a role. It's the soil, built up over thousands of years, full of organic matter and intricate networks of roots. It's the insects, the birds, the mammals, the bacteria, the fungi, all connected in relationships we're only beginning to understand. Once you lose that, once you plow the prairie, overgraze the savanna, or pave the steppe, it doesn't come back easily. The soil erodes. The nutrients wash away. The species disappear. And what you're left with is something much simpler, much poorer, much less resilient. We're learning this the hard way. In the 1930s, poor farming practices combined with drought turned the American prairies into the Dust Bowl, one of the worst environmental disasters in history. Similar problems are happening today in other parts of the world, as grasslands are pushed beyond their limits. But there's also hope. Conservation efforts are working to protect remaining grasslands, to restore degraded ones, to understand and preserve these ecosystems before they're lost. Because grasslands matter. They store carbon in their deep root systems. They prevent erosion. They support biodiversity. They're part of the planet's life support system. So let's return to where we started. You're standing outside, looking at grass. But now you know its story. You know that for 170 million years, the planet belonged to creatures that never saw a single blade of it. You know that the ground beneath a triceratops was covered in ferns and cycads, that a brachiosaurus spent its life browsing conifer needles and never once tasted grass. You know that grass survived the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, lying dormant in the soil while the world burned, then spreading across the scorched landscape when the sun returned. You know that grass found its moment around 20 million years ago, when the climate shifted and forests gave way to open plains. You know that the spread of grasslands reshaped evolution itself, creating new kinds of animals, new ecosystems, new relationships. You know that the open plains, the herds of migrating animals, the ancestors who walked upright under an African sky. All of that happened because grass found its moment. The world before grass was a world of forests and giants, of cycads and ferns, of creatures so massive they seem impossible. It was a world that lasted longer than grass has existed, longer than mammals have dominated, longer than humans have been even a whisper of an idea. But it's gone now. The grass came, and the world was never the same. And that's the thing about evolution, about ecosystems, about the planet itself. It's not a ladder. It's not progress. It's just change. Grass didn't replace the old world because it was better in some absolute sense. It replaced it because the conditions shifted and grass happened to be the right plant at the right time, in the right place. The dinosaurs lived on a strange planet. A planet without grass. A planet where the ground was covered in ferns, where cycads were as common as grass is today, where forests stretched across continents that would one day be prairies. And in some ways, we live on a strange planet too. A planet where grass is everywhere, where it feeds us, clothes us, covers our cities and our fields. A planet where most of our food comes from just 7 species of domesticated grass, where our livestock graze on pastures, where lawns surround our houses. We take it for granted. We mow it, walk on it, complain when it turns brown in the summer. But grass is the foundation of our world, just as much as the forests and oceans. But it wasn't always this way. For most of Earth's history, there was no grass. And one day, millions of years from now, it won't be this way again. The grass will give way to something else. Something we can't predict, can't imagine. That's the legacy of the world before grass. It reminds us that nothing is permanent. Not ecosystems, not empires, not even the ground beneath our feet, not even the plants that seem most ordinary, most eternal. Everything changes. The cycads that once covered the world are now rare, confined to small pockets in tropical and subtropical regions. The dinosaurs that shaped the landscape for 170 million years are gone, leaving only birds as their descendants. The forests that stretched from pole to pole have retreated, replaced by grasslands, by deserts, by ice. And one day, grass itself will be a relic of a particular moment in Earth's history. Maybe the climate will shift again. Maybe the continents will reconfigure. Maybe something new will evolve. A plant we can't imagine, with adaptations we haven't seen, suited to a world we don't yet know. The planet keeps turning. The sun keeps shining. Life keeps evolving. And the story continues, written in layers of rock, in fossilized bones, in the DNA of every living thing. When you look at grass now, really look at it, you're not just seeing a plant. You're seeing 100 million years of evolution. You're seeing the survivors of the asteroid impact. You're seeing the foundation of ecosystems that reshaped the planet. You're seeing the plant that made human civilization possible. You're seeing something that dinosaurs almost never saw, that didn't exist for most of life's history on Earth, but that now covers nearly half the land on the planet. That's remarkable. That's worth pausing for. That's worth remembering. The next time you walk across a lawn, or drive past a field of wheat, or watch a nature documentary showing wildebeest migrating across the Serengeti, remember, this is new. In the grand sweep of Earth's history, this is brand new. Grass is a recent innovation, a late Cretaceous experiment that finally succeeded when the world changed, and it's everywhere now. It's woven into the fabric of modern Earth so completely that it's hard to imagine the planet without it. But there was a world without it. A world of giants and ferns, of cycads and conifers, of strange forests under warm skies. A world that lasted for an almost unimaginable span of time, longer than grass has existed, longer than we can truly comprehend. That world is gone, but it was real. It was as real as the world you see outside your window right now. And the creatures that lived in it, the dinosaurs that walked on ground without grass, that ate plants we barely recognize, that lived and died under a different sky, they were real too. Their world became our world. The atoms that made up their bodies are still here, recycled through the earth countless times. The evolutionary innovations they developed, the ability to grow large, to process tough vegetation, to thrive in diverse environments, those innovations still echo in the animals alive today. And the plants they ate, the ferns, the cycads, the conifers, most of those are still here too, pushed to the margins by grass and flowering plants, but surviving, persisting, carrying on lineages that stretch back hundreds of millions of years. Evolution doesn't erase the past. It builds on it, transforms it, carries it forward. The world before grass didn't disappear. It became the foundation for the world with grass. And one day, our world will become the foundation for whatever comes next. That's the story. That's what makes this remarkable. The dinosaurs lived on a planet that was fundamentally different from ours, not just because of the animals, but because of the plants, the climate, the very ground beneath their feet. And yet, that planet became our planet. The same Earth, transformed by time, by evolution, by catastrophe and recovery, by the slow, relentless process of change. Nothing is permanent. Everything is connected, and the story is still being written. The world before grass is gone, but its legacy is all around us, in the soil beneath the grass, in the fossils embedded in rock, in the deep evolutionary history carried in every plant and animal alive today. And the grass itself, ordinary, ubiquitous, easy to overlook, is a reminder that the world is stranger, older, and more remarkable than it appears. That the ground we walk on has a history. That nothing we take for granted was always there. That's worth knowing. That's worth carrying with you. That's the power of looking back, of understanding deep time, of seeing the present as one moment in an ongoing story that stretches back billions of years and will continue long after we're gone. The dinosaurs' strange planet isn't so far away. It's right here, buried beneath the grass, waiting to be remembered.